leave this for the time being in terms of we're going to sort of disappear off onto a little tangent, because we've sort of covered the basics of fight or flight, or fight, flight, tend, befriend. And in fact, there's more and more research going on. Since Shelley Taylor talked about this whole idea of various different, particularly lionesses in her case, but it looks like actually males and females both have this in humans. We release this hormone called oxytocin, and we have this diplomatic comfort, whatever you want to do, part of ourselves that is somehow this middle ground, this mediator between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And there does seem to be more and more understanding with regards to this as being an emotional aspect of ourselves. Second brain.
Sorry, technical issue. I'm sorry.
I got no strings to hold me down.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello, can you hear me? Right, okay. Zoom, 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 zoom. Okay. This second brain, it produces 90% of the serotonin in our bodies. It seems to have a player with regards to our pain. Now, pain is going to affect our moods. This appears to be more and more to do with how we feel, our mood. Now, remember, serotonin is a mood enhancer, if you like. It's to do with optimism, but if we get too much of it, our libido drops, we start to gain weight, we start to get migraines. Do the guts, if we start to take note of them, tell us, or tell our brains, do they start to give us instructions? And as I've already said, that 100 million neurons in the guts, and 9 times more of them tell the brain what to do than the instructions coming the other way. Gut feeling, it's as near, and it's been in the language for a long time, and it seems to be not far off the truth. Love sits here. Now, this is not scientific from my point of view, I've got no evidence to back that up, but I think it's a very nice analogy, really. And just repeating what I said, the reticular formation, this squelch control, is based on a whole series of factors, how we feel about it, what we remember from last time, the laying down of that memory from the previous one, how dangerous was this thing, depends on how our fight or flight mechanism reacts. The water buffalo is not a problem. It might be dangerous, but it's not particularly dangerous to me, so therefore I'm not too fussed about it.
And that's one of the key things I'm led to understand about the reticular cortex.
Okay.
It is based upon programmed response.
Yeah.
It's about how, so I'm told, how memory develops into behaviour patterns.
Absolutely.
Response patterns.
Yes. And a really good story, and this story is not mine, this is from a chap called Professor Lorimer Moseley, who has written some interesting stuff on pain, and if you talk to him, he says all pain is in the brain, which ostensibly it really is. The pain and pleasure responses are the same receptors, they're just triggered by a slightly different chemical, or rather a decision process in the brain, where the body says, yeah, that's pain, or yeah, that's pleasure. We're talking about the same things, really. The interpretation is key, and that's sort of quite tricky. And this is where we get other types of disparities or deviancy, say, with regards to sex, is some people actually really like being hurt, is because they get pleasure from it. It's a tricky sort of thing, and I don't pretend to even understand necessarily that aspect of it, but the story of Professor Lorimer Moseley, he says he got into it because he's written lots of interesting stuff about I can't remember the book he wrote, but it's another one of these chaps that is really good at giving stuff into a practical application.
What was his name again?
Professor Lorimer Moseley, Lorimer. Now, he's got quite an interesting group page on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, and he has some really interesting groups from all over the world having conversation about this particular aspect, and it's really cutting edge stuff of new perceptions of how pain operates, what it does, how it works. Now he says, it sort of started off when he was a student, and he says he's an Australian chap, and he says he used to go out camping in the outback, And he says that, one day in the outback he gets up out of his little bivouac tent in the morning, half naked, down by the billabong. And he walks and he stumbles on a little bit of a rock, and he says, well, lots of rocks in the billabong, so why should this bother me? He said, trip, oh dear, like this. Anyway, 3 months later he wakes up in hospital because it turns out he'd upset a rather nasty little spider that had bit him and basically nearly killed him. Very nice. Okay, so this didn't really stop him because he liked... Oh, hang on, work steady. He still likes going camping. He'd been doing it ever since he was, whatever, very young. So, a few years later, he's same billabong, same tent, wakes up in the morning, trips over a little stone. Now, the thing is, before, tripping over a little stone was not threatening in any sort of way, so he didn't get any pain and he didn't get any problems, and his fight or flight mechanism didn't react. The second time round, however, he went, ding, oh my God, it's a stone. Because his previous memory of the last time he did something almost identical in the same situation at the same place, and this is also important, is the situation is the same. So therefore, as far as your memory pattern is concerned, hang on a minute, same situation, or pretty damn close, same place, I've just tripped over, last time it nearly killed us. Okay, I wasn't paying attention last time, this time I need to have been... So his fight or flight mechanism went completely over the top. He says he experienced a huge amount of pain in his foot, his big toe, and he was hopping around for ages until he actually calmed down and realised it was just simply a little stone. And this is a fine example of how our fight or flight mechanism responds based on memory and experience. It's very key to that, is because before it's the same thing and yet it reacts differently, and this is where our fight or flight mechanism is very unique to ourselves. Is the same person can have the same experience and will react in a completely different way. So, we are now heading into... I rather like this picture here. Yes, it's fantastic. There are various aspects, and we've sort of trundled around them a little bit, in terms of various different senses, and what we're dealing with in terms of taste and how we deal with food has got something to do with the fight or flight mechanism. Stress, of course, as a whole, has got various things to do with that. And we come back to amino acids. The association with asparagus, as an example, asparagus as being supposedly something to get us going, increase libido, may not be far from the truth at all. And we all know that it gives a smelly wee. I'm not quite sure where the relevance was. I've missed myself there. So we start off with the cell. Another analogy for this is the castle walls. Our membrane fluidity, the membrane around the cell, the thing that keeps it structurally sound, is really important. Cholesterol is a key player to this. Cholesterol is often maligned as being not really that important, or is it all bad and everything else? Now, I'm going to pass these eggs around. I'm sorry you had to deal with smelly eggs for this morning. Grab an... Actually, can you just pass them around rather than me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Hello, camera. So we have the castle walls. If the one part of the wall is not right, then suddenly the whole thing collapses as the battlements fall, and anything that's trying to attack it will get it. Think of it as a stress response. Now, what I want you to do... now this is going to be possibly slightly messy. I'm not quite sure how sensible it is. Possibly, yes. Don't worry about it for the time being. Okay. We can... Yes, we do, actually. Can we have a runner? Sorry, I'm very ill-prepared.
Knives and a roll of tissue.
Well, no, you don't need a knife, just a tissue, just a bit of kitchen roll. Yes, sorry, Sheila, I shall try and clear up myself afterwards. Can I have an egg back, please? Any egg back? Yes, you got the egg boxes there. Now, again, there's a...
Was I supposed to boil these?
Yeah. Well, I think you boiled all but one randomly, didn't you? You boiled one randomly. Now, again, as an interesting analogue, again, in terms of the cell and our three stages, fight or flight and digest and repair, and this middle ground, we sort of need to try to change it slightly, is that if we look at the rather hard outside, we can look at this as fight or flight. It's sort of very cut and dry to a certain degree. You know, that the reactions to it, generally speaking, are relatively severe to the body. Under normal circumstances, not long term, but in terms of the actions on it are very quick, whereas the other system to go into rest and repair and digestion takes a while. So it's nowhere near as hard. We can look at that as a white. It's got all the proteins in it, which is all to do with life, and we have all the makeup of what we need for life, which ostensibly is rest in comparison to the outside. And that central, soft, lovely DNA and cholesterol in the inside is the yummy yolk, the golden centre, if you like. Again, it works for me. Yeah. And we can have a look at that. I mean, quite literally, we don't have to break it, I suppose, but if you want to eat it, it can be, texturally, it's interesting to have literally a feel with it, is that think about that in terms of this is industrial strength stuff on the outside. It protects you. It is the survival of the egg. Don't underestimate the fight or flight. It is not bad. It can be damaging, but ultimately, the fight or flight mechanism keeps you alive. Don't underestimate it. It stops you from running into a bus. I mean, it needs to be operating. But I suppose when we come to don't sit on your egg. Yes. But I suppose if we're referring to something like, say, meditation as an example, that sort of needs to be put away. And we're not going from a side to side here. We're going from the outside inwards. And we, in essence, need to go from, I would say, from that fight or flight response through that resting stage into something somewhere in the middle. That work for people as an analogy? Yeah?
Yeah.
And to someone could say that, being nice and relaxed and chilled out is the way to be. It's like, well, I would say my minimal understanding of these things is, well, that's all very nice. But you could get chilled out on some dope, I suppose, if you want, and that really wouldn't get you very far. Is there needs to be an active plough through that middle section and into something that is actually really quite different. Is that, yes, the protein, the white, is actually very different than the outside shell and appears to be much more giving and bendy and, you want to break it open. Yeah? You break it open and you actually have this rather nice, what appears to be something completely in opposite. It's opposition of it's a completely opposite to the hard shell, isn't it? Completely different. And then you think, oh, that's actually nice and rubbery. That's a lot more pleasant, isn't it? But the thing is, if you start chewing on the white, it's like, well, yeah, they are organic eggs, by the way. Sorry. Oh, yeah. But the white on its own isn't actually that tasty after a bit. You'd sort of need something more. Yeah. Not a bad thing. But once you get into the centre, you have something that has got much greater nutritional value. It is actually rather tasty. Remember this word? Tasty. Yeah? Yummy. You wouldn't really describe the white as being tasty, would you? It's certainly opposite to the hard shell, but, yeah, but...
So what?
So what? Yeah. There's that middle yolk bit, I think most people go, oh, actually, I could probably eat the yolk on its own. A nice round little ball at the centre.
Bit of sensation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This has always been used over the centuries as a model of the psyche.
There's a coincidence.
Difficult to open it.
Yeah. I think it's actually slowly cooked over time. No. So if the membrane gets stressed, then quite literally it becomes a very unhealthy cell and will die, and break down. You are filled with all of these. I'll repeat myself again. The cell. We are made up of trillions of cells, and this is just one. That's just one of them. So let's have a look at the cell membrane itself. So phospholipids, just think of them as fats. I'm paraphrasing, not paraphrasing. It doesn't quite describe them properly, but I'm sure Di would be able to describe them what they really are. But lipid, for the time being, we'll just call them fat, really. Yeah. They form the actual membrane of the bilayer. Yeah. Now, cholesterol modulates membrane fluidity, makes it, whether it's liquid at body temperature. Yeah. So you don't want it too floppy. If there's not enough cholesterol in an egg, if you think about it, is that quite literally you get a really runny egg. Yeah, in terms of the white, it'll spread. Well, it's fresh and actually quite intact. It will actually be quite firm. Yeah.
The cholesterol causes.
Yes.
Oh, so the cholesterol I thought it was
Cholesterol is.
yellow.
Sorry, it is. Cholesterol is predominantly in the yellow, but you have a collection. It is still a collection of proteins in essence.
It's in the white as well.
There is, but it's predominantly in the yolk. But it is everywhere. It's just that there happens to be more of it. There are amino acids and proteins in the yolk as well. But in essence, from the membrane point of view, the thing that keeps it in sort of its shape, if you like, is in essence cholesterol is a major player with regards to this, and it particularly applies in a living body. An egg isn't technically living, that's sort of pretty much as far as the analogue goes, really, I suppose. Now, cholesterol, okay, so cortisol, which is one of these things, it's also triggered when you're in a fight or flight response, is a player with regards to your immune system in regulation of blood sugar, and is mainly synthesized from cholesterol. Yeah. And cholesterol is also a parent compound from which your body derives all steroid hormones. What are those steroid hormones? Glucocorticoids. Yeah? So if your body is part of the fight or flight response that triggers that adrenaline, your glucocorticoids, it is going to become, the manufacture of those things is going to be coming from cholesterol. They're the main parent compound. So you need plenty of cholesterol. Every synapse in your brain is coated with a lovely coating of cholesterol. Makes things fire across properly. Yeah. Yes, no, you. Sorry. Well, this is where we get into the question about cholesterol and fat and things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Is if your brain is about 65% water and all the rest is saturated fat and cholesterol. Why on earth would you want to reduce either of those? Every time you breathe, the lubricant that allows your lungs to go to and fro is saturated fat. Your body does not store unsaturated fat. And we're coming to that about fats and how they're built. And this is where we come to the difference between what is a fat and what is not a fat. Remember, cholesterol is not fat. Cholesterol is a fatty-like substance that actually helps with the binding around fats to get rid of ones you don't want out of the body as well. Creates parts of the bile process. We'll come to that in a little bit. So, glucocorticoids, example of steroid hormones that mainly affect your metabolism. They're involved in the decrease of inflammation and the increase of resistance to stress. So on the one hand, these glucocorticoids are the things that stimulate your appetite and are part of the stress response. But also they're part of how your body then starts to adapt to having that repetitive process go on if you've got long-term stress. Unfortunately, too high levels of glucocorticoids then start to impede your memory. And there's quite a lot written on that with regards to too many glucocorticoids have a lot of detrimental effects.
that have an impact on dementia and age?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, ostensibly I would say yes, because any long-term stress, again, this whole thing about the fight or flight, the body really is this movable, springy object. It is meant to move. It is not meant to be sat still for too long. Now, I'm sure the chaps that meditate for months on end, I'm sure that's great. But in real terms, your body's a nice little fluid S-shape. Your body's a movable object.
It was, legend has it, with regards to the Shaolin of China,
yes,
that they were, at one point in time, fat, lardy, spending too much time in meditation. And it was only with the influx of an Indian martial artist and a sadhu type of person who came and taught them the martial arts for that very reason.
Because it's balance. You know, in your body's an S shape. It's meant to be a nice spring thing. We breathe in, we breathe out. We don't just breathe in and hold it. We breathe in and we breathe out. There has to be an oscillation. The nature of ostensibly the universe or anything going is there. Nothing can withstand long-term, even in building of suspension bridges. There has to be an oscillation of tension. There has to be the application of pressure, and then it must let go. Otherwise it will break. Hence why steel is a better constructive material for bridges than iron is, because iron is too rigid, so therefore it becomes weak if there is continual load put on it. And this applies to the body. There was a chap called Professor Sergei Grakovetsky, who used to work for the KGB, and he was asked by the Russian army to, and he was also a structural engineer, and he was asked by the Russian army to plan how he would get soldiers from A to B across Russia, and Russia's quite a big place, but they needed to be ready to fight. And so he looked at what the Romans did and what Napoleon did, and apparently the same sort of thing was true, is that you can't simply march an army from A to B and expect them to be all ready to go when they arrive at their destination, because they'll be just tired, particularly when they've got all their gear on. And so he came up with this way of walking the Russian army across vast distances and them not tiring and them being ready to go. And this was apparently pretty much close to, as far as he's concerned, how Napoleon and the Romans must have done it, is that you march them for 45 minutes and then you have to rest for 15. And apparently you can do this in essence indefinitely without the army tiring, is because they're having this movement. Sorry, I'm just falling asleep there. You have this movement, you're loading the body, but then it needs to have stress. And he found that if you march the army for an hour, then the levels of stress would actually start to escalate very quickly, and the army would actually tire out extraordinarily quickly. It was an exponential curve. It would suddenly go whoosh after 45 minutes. And he was just postulating this idea of, in the Western world, we work for 8 to 10 hours straight. And he says, the thing is, and we only have 2 days off. He says, actually, in real terms, you work for 8 hours straight for 3 days. In essence, you need to have, the rest of the week off to recuperate. Not quite that, but it was one of these strange pieces of information. So he looked then at the African women that walked across vast distances with huge, great weights on their head of water, and he pitched some of their best, crack troops. With their loaded gear of roughly the same amount of weight that these ladies were carrying. And he said that, these ladies were basically doing a 50-mile round trip in some cases. And he says, it's blazing hot, they're carrying a huge weight, and their crack troops, because they were marching, and as they're putting pressure on their body, is they wouldn't last very long at all. He says he's talking about 5 or 10 miles, and that's it. They're in that kind of heat with that kind of weight. He says they were useless. And yet these women that looked half-starved, they're doing this. They're going boing, boing. And they're loping this black rhythm, if you like, that they referred to, is the springiness of the spine they're allowing the body to load and then let go, load and let go. And so therefore, you're saying in theory, they can essentially keep going like that because they're not tiring. They're using the natural springiness of your sinews, your fascial tone, to then drive you to the next stage. It's Tigger. You know, boing, boing, boing. You're only doing half the amount. And actually your body's doing most of the work for you rather than actually trying to load your muscles to do the work. And he refers to walking and running as two totally separate things in the same way as horses are. Is that you look at a horse walk versus when it goes into a canter, it changes completely in terms of the motion that it does. And apparently humans do the same thing, is that walking, in essence, is a fascial movement in normal terms. A muscular movement is we are engaging, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're using our muscles to do it. And when we start to run, we flick over into a fascial movement, is that we're using the spring is driving us. Hence, when you look at most of the long-distance runners, they are not big, muscular, strong chaps. They're these wiry chaps that can run for blinking ever because they're using this natural spring within ourselves. But in the case of these ladies, they are in essence using a fascial movement when they're walking. Westerners, we tend to go, yes, I must walk, and we're driving all the time. Whereas perhaps if we sort of do the Jamaican thing, where we're sort of doing this, we might actually help ourselves a little.
So you're saying that even though they don't stop for this 15 minutes every...
Yeah, yes, they don't need to because they are naturally flicking from one to the other. They're oscillating from one to the other. They're loading, letting go, loading, letting go. They're breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. The same way as the body naturally oscillates from sympathetic to parasympathetic and back again. It needs to have an oscillation somewhere along the line. And one can see quite a lot of things in all walks of life where that is the case, is you can look at that. The body needs... The heart does the same thing. It loads one section of the heart while the other one's releasing, and then it does that. It oscillates between the two.
I was watching a programme last week, I think. It might have been the week before. And they were saying that kangaroos should just bounce 15 metres per hour. That's pretty amazing. The faster they go, the less energy they use.
Yeah, because they're relying on the springiness. Because they're using a fascial... Yes, because they're using both the weight of the tail and the natural springiness, so they don't actually have to use effort. Yeah. And if you look at, for the same reason, it's a fascial strength rather than muscular. And one can think of, for those people that have ever played golf, when you hit it right, it's almost effortless. Whereas when you're trying hard, you're actually trying to use your muscular strength to hit it harder, whereas actually hitting it right is actually far more... Technique is better than the actual strength you have. And in martial arts, it's the same thing, is that being strong makes no never mind. It's using the body as a whole, as a single unit. And actually, when you hit something, you don't hit something with your hand, you're hitting it with the whole body. You're driving up through and out. I believe that is correct. Yeah. Okay, right. So another little mention of the other different types of hormones. Really, got more mineral corticoids, which maintain salt and water balance, and neurosteroids, neuro meaning brain, are produced from cholesterol by your brain. Yet another use for cholesterol. Now, the liver is responsible for over 80% of your cholesterol level. Diet only accounts for less than about 20% of it. Now, there is some argument that actually eating cholesterol plays very little, if any, in terms of your cholesterol levels. Too little cholesterol can lead to poor levels of hormones such as testosterone, estrogen and progesterone. Now, there is the other argument now that if you are on a low cholesterol diet or your medication to lower cholesterol, it is more likely to affect your libido. And ostensibly, quite a few other things. Like, say, membrane permeability as an example, and problems with your brain.